In this video, we're going to put textures on our wall. We'll begin by shift-selecting both surfaces, freezing the transforms, and deleting the history. I'll select one of the walls to begin with, and I'm going to go to UV, and I'm going to go to Planar and the attributes. And with wall select, I'll hit W to determine which of my axes is perpendicular to the surface. In this instance, it is the blue Z-axis. So I'll set it for Z, and I'll click Apply, and I'll immediately go over to my channel window here. I'm going to make sure the projection width and height are the same number. I'll right-click and choose Object Mode, select the wall, and then I'm going to go to UV Editor. And if I hit F on the keyboard, it'll show up, and there's my wall, and it fits the aspect ratio of the geometry we created. Now I'm going to be stacking the other one right on top of it. And the way it works inside the UV editor is that this initial box where this has come into, that's the only area in which Photoshop will see these UV maps. So I'm going to start by right-clicking and choosing UV shell. And I'll select the shell. Hitting W on the keyboard, I'm going to move it outside of the box, like so. And the reason I've done that is because each time we add a new texture to a surface, it stacks on top of the previous one, and that's not always desirable. Now we'll go and we'll put the UV map on the other wall. And when I click on that, you can see what the shape of it is because I haven't yet frozen the transforms or used planar mapping. So once again, I'll go to my object mode, freeze the transforms, delete the history. I'll go up to UV Planar, Attributes, and in this instance, it's just the opposite axis, which is the X. Again, I'll hit Apply. I can close that out now. Going to my channel box, I'll be sure the projection width and height are the same. Hitting Return to set it. And now if I look in my UV editor, I can see there's the box or the UV map for that wall as well. I'll return to my object mode. And my objective now is to stack both of them on top of each other and scale them a little bit to keep the proportions even so that when I put my texture on in Photoshop, the pattern is scaled properly for both surfaces. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll shift select both surfaces of wall, and then I'll right click and choose UV shell, and I'll put the one that we'd put outside earlier on top of the new one. Now I need to scale both these just a little bit because when it comes close to the edges of this box, that means the edges of my UV map will not show in Photoshop. I'll marquee select very broadly both surfaces. I'll hit R on the keyboard, and I'll scale it in a little bit. I'm going to return to my object mode for both pieces, once again shift selecting them, and then in the UV editor I'll go up to Image, UV Snapshot, and I've set my aspect ratio for 1024. Setting one number will automatically set the other because it's locked aspect ratio for that square that only Photoshop will see. And I've used the image format as a PNG, which Photoshop understands, and it will give us an alpha channel with a black line. I'll put it in my folder, and I'll give it a name, and then in the lower left-hand corner of UV Snapshot, I'll choose Apply and Close. If you get an error message when you do that, that's because you're in the editing mode for your geometry, and not in the object mode as it should be. Now we'll go into Photoshop and we'll put the texture on that. With both my PNG, UV map, and my texture open in Photoshop, I'll start by copying and pasting the pattern I want to use into the PNG. Command A or Control A on the keyboard, or select all, and then edit copy, or Command or Control C, going to the PNG, edit paste, and now I'll put it below the PNG, changing the layer order. And now I'll scale it and repeat the pattern if necessary. I'm going to turn off the UV map and save this. And by turning off that UV map, it won't show up on the model itself. I'll return to Maya, shift select both walls, right click, choose Assign New Material, Arnold AI Standard Surface. And in the right hand side, I should see my AI Standard Surface. I'll name it Walls. If you don't see that immediately, you can right click on either of them now in the viewport and go to material attributes, and it'll bring that same attribute window up. I'll now click on the checkerboard pattern at the far right hand side of the slider for color under base, and I'll choose File. I'll click on the little folder and I'll navigate out to my texture, select the PSD and open. And if you don't see your surface immediately with the texture, you can always hit 6 on the keyboard.